fruitful life. Thank you.
Senator Harris.
Thank you. I want to echo the comments of my colleagues in thanking the men and women who serve in your agencies. I am concerned that the political attacks against the men and women of your agencies may have had an effect on your ability to recruit, retain, and also the morale of your agencies. So I would like to emphasize the point that we all, I think, share in making, which is we thank the men and women of your agencies for their selfless work. They do it on behalf of the American people without any expectation of award or reward, and we cannot thank them enough for keeping us safe. Director Wray, Chairman Nunes's memo included sensitive FISA information regarding a person who worked on the president's campaign. According to the White House statement, the president was the one who authorized the memo's declassification. Do you believe there is an actual, or at least the appearance of a conflict of interest when the president is put in charge of declassifying information that could complicate an ongoing investigation into his own campaign?
Well, Senator, as we've been very clear what our view was about the disclosure and accuracy of the memo in question, but I do think it's the President's role as Commander-in-Chief under the rule that was invoked to object or not to the declassification. So I think that, that is the President's responsibility.
Regardless of whether there is an appearance or actual conflict of interest?
Well, I leave it to others to characterize whether there's an appearance or actual conflict of interest, but I think the President was fulfilling his responsibility in that situation.
If the President asked you tomorrow to hand over to him additional sensitive FBI information on the investigations into his campaign, would you give it to him?
I'm not going to discuss the investigation in question with the President, or much less provide information from that investigation to him.
And if he received that information and then wanted to declassify it, would he have the ability to do that from your perspective?
Information from the...
However he received it, perhaps from members of the United States Congress.
I think legally he would have that ability.
And do you believe the President should recuse himself from reviewing and declassifying sensitive FBI material related to this investigation?
I think recusal questions are something I would encourage the President to talk to the White House counsel about.
And has the FBI done any kind of legal analysis on these questions?
Well, happily, I'm no longer in the business of doing legal analysis. I now get to be a client. And blame lawyers for things instead of being the lawyer who gets blamed. So we have not done legal analysis.
Have you blamed any lawyers for their analysis of this issue?
What's that?
Have you blamed any lawyers for their analysis of this issue?
I have not yet, no.
Okay. Is the FBI getting the cooperation it needs from social media companies to counter foreign adversaries' influence on our elections?
I think the cooperation has been improving. I think we're continuing to work with the social media companies to try to see how we can raise their awareness so that they can share information with us and vice versa. So I think things are moving in the right direction, but I think there's a lot of progress to be made.
What more do you need from social media companies to improve the partnership that you'd like to have with them to counter these attacks?
Well, I mean, I think we always like to have more information shared more quickly from their end, but I think from their perspective, it's a dialogue. They're looking to get information from us about what it is we see so that they can give responsive information. So I think we're working through those issues.
Do you believe that the social media companies have enough employees that have the appropriate security clearance to make these partnerships real?
That's not an issue I've evaluated, but I'd happy to take a look at it.
Please do and follow up with the committee. Director Coates, one of the things that makes guarding against foreign intelligence threats on social media so complex is that the threat originates overseas, and so that would be within the jurisdiction of the CIA and the NSA. And then it comes to our shores, and then it passes on to the FBI and also the social media companies themselves. I'm not aware of any written IC strategy on how we would confront the threat to social media. Does such a strategy exist in writing?
I would have to get back with you on that. I'd be happy to
look into it. From my perspective right now, a written strategy, specific strategy is not in place, but I want to check on that.
Okay, please do follow up. And also, last year, Congress passed a bipartisan Russia sanctions bill. However, the administration has not imposed those sanctions. From an intelligence perspective, what is your assessment of how Russia interprets the administration's inaction?
I don't have information relative to what the Russian thinking is in terms of that particular specific reaction. There are other sanctions, as you know, that are being imposed on Russian oligarchs and others through the United Nations and through other things that have been done in reference to the JICPOA. But specifically on your question, I don't have an answer for that.
Senator
Can
Harris,
you provide? Yes.
may I just comment? I think we ought to look at that in a broader context. That is how the Russians view all of the actions of this administration, not just a particular set of sanctions or the absence thereof. So as we've watched the Russians respond to this administration's decision to provide defensive weapons in Ukraine, to push back against Russian efforts in Syria. Sanctions placed on Venezuela were directly in conflict with Russian interests. The list of places that the Russians are feeling the pain from this administration's actions are long.
But, Director Pompeo, I'm sure you would agree that in order to understand the full scope of effect, it is also important that we analyze each discrete component, including what is the interpretation of this administration's failure to enact the sanctions, as has been passed and directed by the United States Congress in a bipartisan manner. Have you done that assessment?
So, Senator, in closed session, I'll tell you what we know and don't know about that discrete issue.
Right.
And I'm happy to show. Yes, I agree with you. It is important to look at each one in its own place. But I think what we most often see in terms of Russian response, it's to the cumulative activities in response to Russian activities. That is how the United States responds to those in a cumulative way.
Thank you. I look forward to our conversation.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Cornyn.
Director Coates, you alluded to the activities of transnational criminal organizations, and I'm thinking particularly as regards our neighbors down south of our border. Recently, I heard somebody refer to the cartels, these transnational criminal organizations, as commodity agnostic. In other words, they'll traffic in people, they'll traffic in drugs and other contraband, all in pursuit of money.
Whatever brings in the most dollars.
Senator Manchin, I know, and others have alluded to their concern about, and certainly we all share the concern about the deaths and overdoses caused by drugs in America, much of which comes across our southern borders through our ports of entry. This week we're going to be considering border security measures as part of a larger package that the President has proposed while addressing the so-called DACA recipients. But do you believe that modernizing our ports of entry, providing an enhanced technology and other means to surveil and follow and identify illegal drugs coming across our ports of entry would be a good thing for us to do?
I do. I do think that a layered approach is necessary to. It's clear that just one specific defense put in place is not going to solve the problem. It needs to be a layered interest of not only physical facilities but also border patrol, also how those who arrive and perhaps dissipate in waiting for their court appearance, tracking them. There's a whole range of things that I think are going to be needed to stop that flow from coming in.
It's been alluded to, but let me just emphasize my concerns that with the demand side, maybe we've given up, I hope not, in addressing the demand side, which of course provides the money and the incentive for these cartels to operate, and something I think deserves the full attention and focus of the United States government. I've heard General Kelly in his previous job at DHS and talk about that, and I hope we will return to that focus as part of this layered approach, the demand side, because it's something I think that is maybe the hardest thing to deal with, but perhaps might have the greatest impact.
Yeah, the supply depends on the demand, and the demand drives the supply and provides the capital in which to take extraordinarily methods that bypass our defenses in order to get those drugs into the United States. And on the demand side, this is a whole of the American people process. It's PTAs. It's, we growing up got these videos of, driving and driver's training and the horrendous look at crashes and so forth and so on. We need to let every student know. We need to let what the consequences of these drugs are to their lives and to their future. We need to get parents involved, parent-teacher associations involved. So whether they pick up their values from church or from the neighborhood or whatever, this is a national crisis, and all of us here represented or are from states which are staggering through the process here of watching young people and others die from drugs that are more potent than they've ever been.
Let me just lay down a couple of markers here in my comments, but then I want to end on CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. I will join Senator Rubio and Senator King, Senator Langford, and others concerned about the failure of the U.S. government, again, to have an all-of-government strategy to deal with the cyber threat. I have no doubt in my mind that we have superior capabilities, and but they're stovepiped, and I don't think the policymakers are doing a good enough job, and I think it's incumbent upon us to try to provide some policy guidance so that you and others in the intelligence community and the national security apparatus can address this threat in a way that needs to be addressed. Our adversaries don't suffer from a lack of an all-of-government policy. They are all over that. And China, I agree with Senator Rubio about their strategy, and some of you have responded to that. But one of the strategies that China and other countries have adopted is to avoid some of the review measures in the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States when it comes to direct investment, buying those dual-use technologies, startup companies and the like, and then using that to gain strategic advantage against the United States. I wonder if maybe Director Wray, could you address that? And then anybody else in the time permitted, I'd be glad to hear what you had to say about that.
Well, Senator, I think you're exactly right that CFIUS reform is particularly relevant to the China threat, although not exclusively China threat. And there's a degree to which CFIUS, as it currently stands, is susceptible too much to the kind of round pegs only go in round holes kind of thing. And it's not hard to come up with other shaped pegs to get around that process. The obvious example being joint ventures, but there are other ways as well. So that's one of the significant problems. Another problem is the amount of time that's built into the process to do a thorough review, which is too short. Another problem is the inability to share information, since other countries our allies are going through the same thing, to be able to share information so when they go through their own versions of a CFIUS process, they have the benefit of what was attempted in our country and vice versa. And I think in general we need to take a more strategic perspective on China's efforts to use acquisitions and other types of business ventures as opposed to just a tactical looking only within the four corners of one particular transaction.
So if I could, because the director laid out really kind of the bigger issue at the strategic level, and for us at DIA, we're kind of taking on the tactical. So we're the ones that are right about ready to penetrate the line. So if you look at supply chain risk management, we actually run the Threat Analysis Center that is hooked into CFIUS, and so we bring these services together and look at supply chain risk management for CI issues associated with whomever may get a contract